Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Beth. Welcome to episode number 36 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. And if you have not tuned in before, this is a show where I interview different thought leaders, therapists, coaches on the topic of transformation. And the premise of this show is looking at transformation as more of an inner experience, an experience of having more of yourself, more intimacy with life, more connection with, our entire world. However one defines that for them, that's what the show really seeks to explore. As opposed to gaining mastery over something or getting what you want. That might be a natural byproduct of this first kind of transformation. And in this show, we are exploring all different kinds of aspects of life that, from the lens of transformation. So I'm really excited to be here today with Sade Ashani. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to dive in on this conversation with you and honored to be invited.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I'm really excited for this conversation too. I think it's a really important one. And I'm excited to be interviewing you on, we're going to be exploring reparenting self-care. And I'm excited to be interviewing you because, I know that what we'll get into is both kind of like what that means, but then how do you actually do that on a practical level? And I really enjoy on this show trying to ground things into the practical, like how into reality. Yeah. Also because transformation can be very lofty, right? And even our ideas of it can be extremely lofty. So anything that we can kind of bring down to earth and practice is always amazing. So before we get started, I just want to introduce Sade. She's an author, a speaker, a coach, and an international philanthropist. She's also has a TEDx talk out. She also wrote a book called "In the Name of the Father," right? Or in the Search of My Father. Excuse me. That basically was talking about her own healing relationship with her father, and how, healing our relationships with our fathers or the masculine or our father wounds can really create an extremely different, more healthy experience of love. And so at the heart of Sade's work that she does with clients and a lot of her speaking as well is about, helping women specifically to work through, to explore their past, to explore how some of their how they might be showing up in relationship today with both themselves and with the other and with men that is not serving them, and how that, relates back to this original relationship with our fathers. I think you probably would add also with the masculine itself, like how did we kind of come to know the masculine and how did we internalize that as well? So I know some of your work is, it's focused on love, but it's also focused on our relationship with money and our relationship with structure and, all the things that relate to what we might consider to be more of the masculine principle. Is there anything that you would add?
Yeah. I think women often come to me at a breaking point regarding the love life in some way, in the middle of a divorce, on the heels of a breakup, feeling desperate for love and wondering what's going on in this space. And my premise is that the love life tends to get our attention because we've been socially conditioned to look there, especially as women, that it's kind of only been remotely cool to be a woman for, I don't know, max 2 generations. My grandmother couldn't have written the mortgage in her own name. She couldn't go to medical school. They were not accepting female students. So we had, for generations upon generations, we had to marry to survive, to eat, to not be a social pariah. And I feel like we tend to look there. So even though that's not actually the root of the problem. Kind of like if I was a chiropractor or a massage therapist and someone came to me and was like, oh my gosh, my shoulder's hurting so bad, please help me with my shoulder. I'd be able to look at their x-ray and explain to them, well, actually, your love life isn't the problem. Your boundaries are out of alignment. Your relationship with food, your relationship with money is out of alignment. So we bring bring these aspects of the self into alignment with our own values. And then the love life gets free to function the way it was meant to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And what I love about it, actually, just as we get started here, even on the topic, right, is that, this is what it's like the external, like someone might come to you because they want a relationship or they want a better relationship. And what you're really doing with people is how do I support you to know yourself more deeply, to see the places of conditioning that are kind of, that you've swallowed that maybe aren't you and that aren't actually serving your life. And then,
and one of the main places that shows up is self-care.
Yeah. So that's a good place to dive into the topic. Yeah. But then also what I just want to, before we dive into the topic, what I'm finding, what's coming up for me is that, as you support people as you support women in all of these ways, right, to know who they are, know what they want, take care of themselves, feel confident to go after what they want, which to me are all kind of those internal qualities, then life starts to shift for them on the outside, more of as a byproduct of the kind of relationship that they're having with self.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the game changer.
Yeah.
So what I find is that a lot of us are struggling with self-care, and specifically now in the time that we're in, with so many of us on quarantine and in isolation, as I've been getting a lot of feedback from, my newbie baby clients, that they're like, what self-care? I can't go get a manicure, that I can't go get a massage, that there's been this social conditioning surrounding self-care that it's something to be outsourced, that it's somewhere you can go, do and spend money on. But the idea that the first hour of the day and the last hour of the day be this conscious, precious space where we care for ourselves is a new concept for many of us. For those of us who have been in personal development and healing for a long time, we know we're supposed to wake up and meditate and take some time for ourselves, get our yoga stretch on. But how we approach that space, I think, is really kind of the universal theme that I'd like to bring forward. What energetics are behind that, and how are we motivating ourselves to get on the mat, to get in prayer, to take a bath, to care for ourselves. And for a lot of us, there is shame and discipline pushing that space.
So that's great. I would say let's dive into that. What is the energy that you see women bringing to their relationship to self-care? We could start there.
Well, speaking for myself, when I was first kind of engaging with this pop culture, treat yourself, take care of yourself kind of stuff years and years ago, just really finding my footing with it, I would set up like this elaborate morning routine that I could do, maybe on my best day. And then I could do it for a little while and I'd get out of rhythm with it. And then I would beat myself up about it, that I hadn't done it, and try and shame myself back into routine. If I got out of step with my fresh green yoga juice through 30 minutes meditation, read something inspiring, yoga, blah, 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 I would be angry with myself for not doing it, and disappointed. Like, come on, this is what great leaders do, this, trying to push myself back into this space. By being actually quite mean to Sade. So I started talking to someone about it, about self-care and why it was so inconsistent and bumpy and all or nothing, and why there was so much shame in the conversation of it with myself. And she suggested, I went to see a therapist at the time, and she suggested that I take care of a baby doll and name her Sade and take her with me places. And I was like, I can't actually walk around with a doll in my everyday life. And so we scaled it down to me just taking care of her at home and giving her baths and things like that. So there was this elaborate bedtime routine for the baby. And I had a really hard time with the exercise. She's like really resentful of it, felt like it was a little kooky, and found myself feeling really judgmental about it. And yeah, somewhere around day 3, I was like snapping off, like, I'm going to tell this lady this isn't working. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to learn from this, but it is not downloading. And I was like huffing and puffing around, like grabbing baby oil and getting towels prepared. And I was just like, this is so stupid. And I just was like talking through gritted teeth, so frustrated. I was running this bath, and I like tossed the baby over my shoulder, and I had my arms crossed and like waiting for the bath to drop. Like, if this was a real baby, she would have like drowned. This would be awful. And yeah, and I remember like sitting there with my arms crossed, like tapping my foot, just waiting for this bath to be over already. And this like lightning bolt of realization comes in. It was like totally being bowled over. Like, this is how I was treated, that I was annoying and heavy and difficult to love, and taking care of me before bed was like the last thing anybody wanted to do. And just, how could we get this over with as quickly as possible, because it was such a fucking burden. And it just like I was turned around and like practically dove into the bathtub. I was like holding this little baby doll. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, little Sade. And it just washed over me. It was one of the most profound reparenting exercises I've ever done, was to realize that I was embodying how I was treated during the activities that would one day become my own self-care routine. It was really profound breakthrough for me surrounding why I was having such a hard time with it, why I was irritated with myself about it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm just taking in the story. It's a pretty profound story. Well, also really speaks to, right, like, I don't know if you would have gotten that had you not done the exercise of actually, you know, this like reliving the experience in some way, you know, and having it be so challenging and kind of feeling like totally frustrated and done with it. And what's really fascinating to me, and I think I know this, I mean, in the work I do, I see this all the time, that we, we end up internalizing the same kinds of behaviors, not only towards self, but also towards others. So even as you're taking care, you know, it's like, I'm annoyed with this baby. Why won't the baby, like, so it's both, it sounds like the exercise wasn't working, but there was also like a frustration at, you know, the whole, just like the whole thing, which is what's sad. And I think this is how we, as a culture, I mean, this is how things get passed down intergenerationally if we're not doing, you know, if we're not really doing the work to heal them and to see those shifts. So what I love about this is, like, you're actually also talking about in that moment that this was like a profound shift in your particular, you know, intergenerational trauma, or the way that it went in your family. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so for those of us who had busy, hardworking, overtired, overstressed parents taking care of us after a long, hard day of work, you know, I encourage us to really look at the space where we are showing up for ourselves, getting ready before bed. Lots of us are falling asleep on couches with unbrushed teeth and connected to screen time, and literally turning off the screen, you know, moments before closing our eyes, that we get to rewrite that story for ourselves. we can start small and start setting an alarm 30 minutes, 45 minutes before bedtime, and just engage with ourselves. That's a really good time for bath time and mirror work and it keeps grounding back into the body. We spend a lot of time in our heads in this culture. Really nice time to get some oil massage in, touch our bodies just because it feels good, not because we're doing something. Was another huge realization for me in the process, that the only time I was really touching my own body was because it's like I was putting oil or lotion on it, and other than that, why would I touch myself? Or just rub your own arm because it feels good. Bringing some presence to that space where you get to reparent ourselves. And reparenting self-care to me means, really having a look at how we are waking up in the morning and how we are going to bed at night. Many of us have trauma surrounding being rushed out the door, hurry up, yogurt stuffed in your mouth in the car on the way to school, and getting on the bus with a Pop-Tart and, practically a kick on the butt to get out. That slowness, gentleness, tenderness with ourselves is perhaps the most profound reparenting I've done to undo the hurry home I grew up in.
It also strikes me, again, I love all your examples because it's, again, that it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it, right? So it's not the fact that, okay, I have to go from here to here and I don't have a lot of time. It's like, can I even take, 5 seconds and just stop and breathe, and that kind of small reset, one, there's you're bringing the gentleness with self, but you're also, it's a rewiring too, right? All of those small moments, you're, in that moment, you're rewiring it. But yeah, it strikes me that it's not so much, sure, even the example you gave of like, okay, touching oneself. So there are actual self-care things that can be really supportive. However, if we're not actually able to be in presence with them or take them in or appreciate them, then they may not have the same, effects, right? And so maybe even just having a moment of doing something that you really can take in, right? And being creative about that too. Like that could be like, I'm going to go outside and look at this beautiful tree, instead, meaning that like self-care can also be something that's, we're creative around it. It's not an idea that we've swallowed of what it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
You are talking about like this. I think it's important to talk about the time before bed and in the morning. That feels good for me because I think we all have. It's like, how are we being with ourselves throughout the day? And I also think it's like there is this in my world, at least in my experience, and what I see with others as well, is like there is this space of being able to, like, of how we're relating with ourselves and being creative around it and getting to choose, like, this is what feels good,
Yes, I actually had a really hard time trying to follow the self-care rules. Like when I looked up those morning routine kind of things, none of those worked for me, and trying to fit that shoe on made me feel like a failure. Yeah. I think one of the things that really helped me surrounding self-care was to pick non-negotiable acts, which is like, no matter what, I'm going to do these 5 things, and they're expandable and contractible. So one of mine is breathe. So on some days that can be 20-minute breathwork class that I look up on YouTube, and on other days that can be 3 deep breaths. Another one of mine is move my body. That can be a 30-minute run or turning on one song and slow dancing with myself while I cry. It depends on what the day is. Yeah. So it allowed me to feel that commitment, but also making space for my feminine to flow and have spaciousness, allowing flexibility and change. Because what I want on day one of ovulation is not what I want on day one of menstruation. Those are two very different vibes for me.
Yeah. I love that. I think I love what you just shared, because it like this is what it makes me think of. Like, you're kind of speaking to like the inner masculine, which is actually saying, okay, self-care is important. So here's these kind of categories of things, but then within that, I'm going to dance, and I'm going to try different things. I'm not going to have it be this rigid thing, which then, unfortunately, and my experience is this as well, is that if it's too rigid or it becomes a thing I have to do, then all of a sudden it becomes tight. And then my relationship to it, like, I can have this with meditation. I've been a long-term meditator. I mean, I can meditate in a way where I'm tight, or I can meditate in a way that's like, oh, this, I'm here and this feels right. So I love that, because yeah, it just feels like it's a really beautiful combination of both worlds, like making sure that you do make the space and that you're committed to that self-care, but that within that, you're letting yourself, try different things. And also the categories I liked too, because it's sort of like, okay, I need to move my body each day, but what that looks like doesn't matter, actually.
Right.
It's that I'm committed to doing that, Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yay. It's so nice to be understood.
I love it. Well, I'm really appreciating, and I know your work really well, but I'm really appreciating, like, there's a simplicity to, I think, and I just will give a plug for Sade's work, like this. I think the way she's speaking right now is really how the heart of your work, which is that you're very gifted at sort of like, let's look at a concept or something that could really support your life, and then let's find a way to actually do it practically, but in a way that isn't like, overbearing, which is what a lot of us have had, or that there's a right or a wrong. Like, really, you're helping women to find their own way, to find their own way through that, and what's their story and how do they want to do it. So I just think, yeah, this is a beautiful, this conversation so far even has just been a beautiful representation of that, how to do that. There's something that's been coming through for me, and I'd love to share, and it's connected to this conversation, but also to something I've been experiencing is recently and thinking about, and I sort of said it earlier, but that just this process of rewiring, and that it's just moment after moment. And so when I think of even like reparenting self-care and everything you've already offered, it's not this like big lofty thing that we're trying to do. It's like, how am I being with myself moment to moment? And how am I showing up for that? And like, I know right now in my own life, part of the way that my self-care is lacking is that I'll get super focused on the computer with work, and then I'll kind of lose sort of presence with the rest of reality. And then I start to feel kind of like not right, and like a little deranged, and a little like my body shuts down. And so just as an example, right, like I've actually been thinking about this kind of reparenting self-care or self-care as like just even having the consciousness to get up and like, okay, I'm going to even if it's like, I'm going to set an alarm for 30 minutes and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to like take a walk or come out. And then those small moments are creating kind of a shift over time. So I wanted to speak to that, both to say that I think self-care can look so many different ways, because for me, that's what it's looking like right now. And that I think it's moment to moment, like all of our healing is, right? All of our, anything that we're trying to transform or shift, it's only happening in the moment. And I think we take the pressure off, right? It's, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Releasing the pressure from ourselves, I think, is such an important piece here. For those of us who grew up in households that navigated with a lot of shame and discipline to motivate behavior and to correct behavior, many of us internalized that. So there's an inner critic who's ready to to come and talk to us about any negative emotions that we're feeling, or actually, I don't even like that phrasing anymore. For any emotions that we're feeling that we perhaps wish we weren't, like, disappointment or frustration. I find that in those moments it's difficult for me to want to engage in self-care. That for me personally, with quarantine and COVID and feeling a little bit more overwhelmed with work and a tiny person who I don't feel comfortable sending to school and all the things, it has been harder for me to get out the door. Like, I want to overachieve to assuage the feeling of not getting enough done. So I've been also spending more time behind the computer, also spending more time with like my head buried in the book, trying to like tick things off the to-do list so that I can feel good about myself, and noticing the correlation between stress and desiring to achieve in order to feel good enough and worthy enough, and watching that show up. And you're like, oh, there it is again. 17-year-old Chade who wants to get the A so that she can feel good. Okay, got it. And watching that piece of myself show back up, and going for a walk and getting out the door with her is really like interrupting that pattern for me. So noticing when I want to overachieve, and interrupting the pattern. Close the computer even though there's more to be done, and get out the door with my little teenage self and have a talk with her. It's been really powerful over these last few weeks. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that example. I think it's such an important one, because you were earlier talking about self-care as, these kind of, how are we caring for ourselves throughout the day or in the morning, in the evening, and what we might consider to be self-care. And I think this example is like you're caring for the teenager in you that is kind of getting caught in an old psychological emotional pattern, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's I'm sure everybody can relate to that right now. And this is why it's such an important topic right now with COVID and with like just everything going on in our world and all the added stress, and unknown and fear and, everything that everybody's experiencing. That part of that reparenting is like, okay, not that we've ever experienced, I was going to say not that we've ever experienced this kind of thing in our lifetime, but people have experienced lots of other traumas and abuse and all kinds of things as children. So it's like, this is the time that, of course, that's going to come to the fore, like whatever right, you've experienced, that, whatever level of healing you have, or even if you've done a lot of healing, like, I think this is what I like about the reparenting conversation, is that you might have done tons of healing and we still have to show up and reparent that little one, or that, ourselves at 17, because it doesn't necessarily go away. But what we do learn, like some of that pain doesn't go away, that trauma, but what we learn is, oh, but I can show up for you now. Like, I'm here with you. So I think that's such an important part of, this kind of, this conversation is helping us to deal with our own, pasts and our own emotional struggles.
Yeah, we have tools now, that we can use, and quantum leap it back down the timeline and hold that little one who was being told to hurry up and finish brushing your teeth in a grouchy voice and get shoved on the bus, so that we actually don't have to hurry anymore. We can slow down and be with ourselves, as scary as that is. Like, I want to acknowledge how brave and courageous we are to reparent, to get in there and look at the blueprint we got handed and start moving some things around and start redesigning. This is hard work, and I want to honor and acknowledge us for that. Yeah, again,
I love this conversation, and I love sort of the way you're thinking about it, because again, it takes me back to um, just that it is an ongoing process over time. Like, it's not about having like a session with a mentor or coach or a healer, you know, it's about how am I doing?
Boom, I'm healed.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It's about, it's like, it's a life, I mean, it's an ongoing life, I don't know what we call it, life process, or it's, you know, it's something that we carry with us, and sure, we can get better at being with those, you know, ourselves at different ages and reparenting, and we have more and more insights over time about, oh wow, I do that, and I guess I do, you know, seeing where that might come from and responding differently, but that there is something that, you know, there's it, like, this conversation feels so important because it, again, it's like a lived moment to moment experience of being ourselves, you know, and meeting ourselves where we are. And there's nowhere to get. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm going to get somewhere and then I'm not going to have these parts come up. It's actually like, no, what is my relationship to this, you know? And I think this time period that we're in is pretty, I mean, it's, I love that you're like commending the courage to show up in this. And I also think like it's this amazing gift because it's showing us all the ways in which, wow, I'm not very kind to myself in this place. How do I be kinder to myself? Wow, this is what happens when I'm in more unknown, you know? Like, these are the feelings that I have. This is how I get into like ultra work mode and kind of lose myself, whatever it is, you know?
Right.
And how do I come and meet myself in a different way? So,
Yeah. I think I like to think of self-care as, a moment to moment, right hand over the heart, left hand over the belly. How can I take care of you? How can I love you right now? And listening for an authentic response. You never know what you're going to hear. Sometimes, like, my inner child shows up and she's like, I want to dance, I want to laugh. And sometimes somebody else comes around and is like, I want to go to the beach and weep openly. And like, just let me sob and shout and throw sand and get it out. My journey with self-care really revealed to me how uncomfortable I was with the emotion of anger and how much it had been suppressed in me, and what my relationship was with anger. And this has really shown up in my work with women, that it has been taken away, made dirty, bad, or wrong, that their brothers were allowed to wrestle and shout and punch and whatever else, but they were handed, teacups and Barbie dolls and basically denied their anger. And I had a very similar experience. I have a very disabled sibling, and I always felt that I wasn't allowed to be angry with him, even though we were just going through normal sibling stuff. And so my experience with anger was that I was supposed to suppress it and put it down and away somewhere.
So as happens, we lost reception. We're doing a Bali to Hawaii connectivity. Woohoo! And we're back. So Sade, if I'm remembering correctly, was talking about her relationship to anger and reparenting that form of self-care.
So taking care of myself revealed, I realized it was kind of like trying to take care of like this spiky cactus at first of myself, that like I was so spiky. I didn't want to be held and giving myself foot massages and all this stuff. It was like, all of this annoying girly stuff. And what really came forward in that space, as I was mentioning, it was like there was so much unaddressed, unprocessed anger right underneath caring for myself. It just was like begging to come bubbling out. this wild woman who I had put in a cage and hadn't let her out possibly ever, came barreling forward. It was a really important part of the reclamation of my femininity, was to allow myself access to my emotions and not call any of them dirty, bad, or wrong, or unholy. That was a big one for me, that anger was something that, like, out of control, people who didn't meditate did, poor things. And yeah, I got to face all of that internal self-judgment about anger. And of course, what I found was that I hadn't originally judged myself for being angry, but important caretaking people in my life had, and that I got to reclaim that space.
Beautiful. I mean, I love that example. I think it's so important, in the sense that it's as we care for ourselves, we get to see what emotions come up, and then it's a deepening process. It allows actually more healing to happen, because then we can see,
Yes.
like in your case, it's like, wow, this is how this is how I relate to anger. Oh, this is how I never let myself be angry. This was the outcome of that. This is why I might struggle with self-care. This is why I might struggle with all kinds of things. And so it's like a revealing process.
Right, absolutely. The act of self-care, the practice of self-care will bring forth that which is unprocessed. And I think that's actually why we struggle to hold consistency with it. Secretly, we are afraid of intimacy with ourselves, with the parts of ourselves we would rather hide. And so all of that comes forward when we are looking in the mirror, rubbing our own feet, taking time to listen to the self instead of overriding the messenger, disconnecting ourselves from our intuition. Yeah, I think that's really why so many of us struggle with it. Certainly why I did.
I love what you just said. I think it's a great place to end too. And of course, we could even do like a whole other interview or talk about it. But just the last piece of what you said around that, self-care helps. It's a doorway into confronting our own, fears of intimacy with ourselves. Really being with ourselves. Yeah. And that just feels so important and so beautiful, to have that doorway in. And so I think also leaving people with like, and so of course this is a process, right? Like, of course it's, you get to like, you get to open up that doorway and begin to see the places where, wow, I'm not kind to myself, or wow, I'm not able to be intimate here. Like for you, it was like, I'm not able to be intimate with myself with anger. For someone else, it might be like, I can't be intimate with myself when I'm like being more soft with myself, all the different ways that plays out.
Yeah. So I think on like a last note, I want to encourage us to, if we're more verbal, or we like to write, to find the words that would have been really powerful in some of those, self-care activities when we were young. So for me, that's something like what I really would have loved to have heard. You can take your time. I love you just the way you are. You don't have to earn my love. You don't have to try so hard. You're so easy to love. Some things like that. And being able to say those to myself is truly a testament to, how much work I've put in.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Feels so important. Yeah. And
you're so easy to love is my favorite.
Yeah. I need that too. Well, I would love for you to, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation to have, and just so important, and so many different, I feel like we got into the depths and the nooks and crannies of it. this word
Yeah, it
and
was fun.
concept that's kind of thrown around. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. And, you know, I would say I want to give you a chance to talk about how people can follow you or find you and the work that you do. Yeah.
Sure. Well, first, you're so easy to love, Lori. And secondly, folks can find me here on Facebook. I'm pretty active here. My Instagram is pretty neglected. My website is shadeashani.com. And you can have a look at the ways in which I help women heal the father wound, primarily through reclamation of femininity and getting into alignment with their own values. Yeah. That's where I'm at. That's what I'm up to.
Great. Cool. And do you want to say kind of the kinds of programs that you do, or just have people reach out to you and you have different ways of working with them?
Sure. Yeah, I do one-on-one work and I do group work as well. I run an evergreen group program where folks can jump in whenever they're ready. And I recently started working with men who are dads and who want to rewrite the story and are feeling scared and uncomfortable about kind of the incredible power that they've come to understand that fathers have in their children's lives. So I'm available for that too.
Oh, I love that you're doing that. Oh, so needed. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I highly recommend Sade's work. And one thing I was going to say is that you know, this conversation I think is a really good, it's a really good representation of your work, because like I was thinking at the end that, you know, like reparenting even is something that we learn to do for ourselves, but we also need to learn it in relationship when we haven't had a relationship. And I think you have a very beautiful and powerful way of doing that with people where it really lands. I've done some work with Sade, and I've also done tons of other work that involved reparenting. And, you know, the work that I think I did with you, I can say like those things landed more, you know, it's like, you do have a gift at that. And then being able to, you know, support like how, okay, wow, it sounds like you're not actually able to love yourself here. How do you do that now? You know, so that kind of extending it out. So I'm so happy to have you on the show. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This will, I put all of these up on YouTube and they happen every week. Again, my name is Lori Beth, and I am both a psychotherapist and I offer sessions that way. And then I'm also do what I call psycho-spiritual mentoring for women. And I love working with highly sensitive powerhouse women who providing like many different somatic, spiritual, therapeutic skills. I really take a lot of my work as a therapist and as my own life journey and different spiritual practices and whatnot. And combining that, it's a very comprehensive program. It's one-on-one, and it is 3, 6, or 9 months, depending on how deeply you want to dive in. And one of the main purposes, one of the things that I'm most on fire about is helping women to stop being an endless self-improvement project. So it's stopping the game of endless healing, so we can just show up as we are now. And similar to Sade's work, like really my passion is about, you know, helping women to really find their own way and let go of the conditioning that they've internalized, so that, and trusting their own knowing and trusting who they want to be in the world, and using all different, that's, so if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sade, again.
Thank you, Laurie.